Coming up on this episode of Discover Health Podcast.
The energy is what's responsible for the biochemistry of the body. You need energy to do that. But if you have energy leaks in the body, then you're never going to sustain the energy. And so all those biochemistry processes, they fail to work. That's when I started realizing what are the energy leaks in my life. And this is where the mind body connection starts to come in.
Welcome to the Discover Health Podcast, where we explore the power of gut health, nutrition, and lifestyle to help you feel your best every day. I'm Dr. Josh Sharp, your guide on this journey to better digestion, more energy, and overall well-being. Ready to start discovering? Let's hit the trail. Welcome back to another episode of Discover Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Joshua Sharp, and joining me today is Dayna Wylder. Dayna is a bioenergetic wellness practitioner and founder of Energy Over Matter, whose own journey from being bedbound and blind with multiple sclerosis took her from where she was bedbound to deep healing, and how she reshaped and her view of illness, and now how she understands illness and recovery. She now blends energy medicine, bioresonance, subconscious reprogramming, sound therapy, PEMF, yoga, and nervous system regulation to help clients clear physical, emotional, and energetic blockages and reconnect to their innate capacity to heal. Recognized with the 2025 Center of Excellence Inspiration Award, Dayna's work weaves science, frequency, and consciousness to guide people from merely surviving into feeling vibrant, aligned, and fully alive. Thank you for joining us today, Dayna.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And also, thank you for creating the container for these conversations, because I think this is what's needed in the world is for people to create, their own responsibility for healing and sovereignty over their body and their journey. And also with your family and homeschooling and all of the ways in which we take personal responsibility for the world in which we want to live in. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I like what you said about personal responsibility. With personal responsibility comes empowerment. And so often I think that we want to, and we do, we live in a world where there's a lot of stuff we don't control, but the very few things we do control is how we react to what happens to us. And then hopefully we've got a little bit of control over input, in terms of our health. And so I like that you pointed that out, the regulation aspect and the responsibility aspect. So I know, and I mentioned it in your intro just a little bit, but I know that you've had your own personal struggles with chronic health challenges. I want to rewind and go back to the beginning, to the early days of this struggle. What were some of the first signs and symptoms that you started noticing? And then at that time, what thoughts and feelings were you having?
Well, I mean, I think when the MS first started to be something, I started Googling and thinking this could be MS. And I had done a lot of courses in university about brain and behavior. So MS was something I was already kind of familiar with its presentation. But even before that started coming into my purview, I had symptoms, I think, starting almost from birth. When I look back, I had something like a vagus nerve dysfunction when I was younger. And every time that I would have a traumatic or stressful or fearful emotion, I would pass out and have to be taken to the hospital to be revived. And that trauma, I did have a lot of things starting in childhood that happened to me, and it did continue all the way through into my diagnosis. So there was always something, I think, that was kind of underneath the surface with my nervous system that just didn't seem right. And it did pair with the trauma that went along with it. But I had, I think, like the perfect confluence of so many things. I also had chronic ear infections due to food sensitivities. So lots of antibiotic use, which was affecting my microbiome. And then I had my tonsils and adenoids out, which was popular in the 80s, which is another hit to my immune system. And then just followed that up with all the trauma in my life had caused me to really try to dissociate from my body. A lot of escapism, a lot of bad, poor health habits, a lot of really toxic relationships later in life, abuse, loss, grief. And they all kind of just piled on top of each other. And I think they made the perfect storm where getting ill was almost inevitable. The same way that I've unpacked it and all the things I've done to sort of take off all those layers has been made it inevitable to become healthier. But the real diagnosis, I think, came right after the loss of my firstborn son. And I was still in a very toxic marriage at the time. And that was kind of just like the needle that just broke the whole thing. And the first time, and I was pregnant again shortly after, and I was still grieving though. And the first symptoms that I really started to feel that were kind of MS specific was I could feel my pants when I walked. And what an odd thing to explain to somebody because they were like, "Well, so what? You feel your pants, it's not that big of a deal." But when you're used to your body feeling a certain way, and then all of a sudden something feels so odd and different, it's very noticeable and disconcerting. But every time I would go to the doctor, I think everybody thought, "Well, you're just grieving." They'd offer me antidepressants and kind of ignored me. And then optic neuritis set in, and I lost vision in one eye. And, I was getting an optometrist to look at it, and as soon as they looked in my eye, they seen the pale nerve and went, "Have you ever heard of MS?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, I've already" from my Google searches thinking this could be it. And in Canada, because we have a free medical system, we wait for a very long time for treatment and for MRI. So in that 18 months I was waiting to get any kind of, diagnosis, I had another bout of optic neuritis, went completely blind, all the way black, and then started having vertigo, numbness, weakness, so all the classical symptoms. So by the time I even got diagnosed, I was already pretty sure that's what it was, and also pretty sure I wasn't going to be following an allopathic traditional system.
Well, first of all, 18 months. It took 18 months to really get any imaging done. And then you're just waiting during this time?
Well, and also thinking too, what if you have brain cancer? Because when you do Google searches, it gives you always like, the
Yeah.
doom, right? The
Yeah,
worst.
all the
I was
other
thinking,
possibilities, sure.
yeah, what if it was something that was like you could have treated and it had a timeline on it? Like once you know you have MS, I mean, they say it's progressive and lifelong. So, and the funny part about that is that now I'm actually part of a clinic and I'm seen by a neurologist. I can get an MRI every 3 months. No problem. There's no wait anymore because now that I'm part of somebody's study and I'm being monitored, there's no problem to get that diagnosis, but it's the waiting in the beginning when it you would think would be the most, important time for that
Yeah.
information. Because uncertainty is its own level of stress, the worry of not knowing what's wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, add that stress on to everything else that's going on in your life of the uncertainty and then, yeah, just having to wait so long while by the way, I'm losing vision. That's a scary thing. So many questions popped in my head while you were talking. And one of those questions, if it's not too personal for you, I noticed that you said after the loss of your son. First of all, I'm just so sorry to hear about that. I just can't imagine everything that you must have gone through during that time. But you said you were pregnant soon after, but you were still grieving. Do you feel like the child in the womb was affected by the stress and was affected by, that process in the womb?
Absolutely. So it's something I actually write about in my book. Before I even get into my healing, I don't like to call it protocol, but sort of method. I don't know the right word to call it, but I have a whole chapter in the beginning about what happens before we're even born. So before we even sort of think we start the clock on our health, what happens in the energy in our mother's environment, in the gestation? Because each one of our in bioenergetics, we think about something called germination theory. So whenever a certain amount of organs, tissues, or functions in the body are kind of developing at the same time, so we start sort of with source, which is that spark of life. Then we have cellular division, and then we start to have circulation and then it gets to nerves and the last thing we develop is our bone structure. So as all of those things that are developing at that gestation period, whatever happens at that time is going to affect the bioenergetics. And this is how we can have things like in Chinese medicine they think that your liver, your gallbladder and eyes are all energetically similar in frequency because in utero they were all developing at the same time. So for my son, I think he unfortunately had quite a few things going on during the pregnancy, which was not only just the fact that I was grieving, but also this heightened abuse in my external environment because my partner is also for all the things that he had going on. Now it's made worse by that he's also grieving too. And also, I haven't recovered enough from one pregnancy to another. I got pregnant again too quickly. And so my body didn't have a chance to sort of come back into balance and homeostasis and health before I'm immediately pregnant again. And I think that showed up because he had 2 abscessed teeth, at around 4 years old that were pulled, and they were paired on both sides, and again, in Chinese medicine, they believe that each, tooth is associated with, organs in the body, and the fact that it happened on both sides simultaneously and had to be pulled says to me that something in utero, a particularly traumatic moment during that gestation, impacted him.
Yeah.
So, and I also, my diet probably wasn't as good then, my sleep, like everything just wasn't as good because you don't have very good self-care habits when you're grieving. So, all around, but I don't like to think that that's fatalistic because I think all the things that's happened for him, outside since he's been born, hopefully get to counteract a lot of the unfortunate negative things during pregnancy.
Yeah. Uh, what might be fatalistic for some is opportunistic for others. It's an opportunity like, wow, I have to focus more on this area and I have to try harder in this area. But a lot of times in doing so, you develop skills, you develop resilience, and it can turn out to be a blessing if you allow it. And so there's obviously so many hard things, especially for kids, and then health challenges. Adding those in, it can make it harder, but in some ways, it can turn out to be a blessing. And I've been able to see that with some patients and clients, and just having such a great attitude. It's been encouraging to me, even during some really difficult stuff. And going back to your story, losing vision, and you finally get a diagnosis. What treatments were offered? And I know that you said you were already thinking, okay, I don't necessarily want to go down the allopathic road. First of all, I feel like they let you down, making you wait so long to actually get a diagnosis and actually get confirmation what was going on. But what things were you offered, and what things were you told by traditional doctors about your condition and how it would progress?
Yeah, so going back, this is almost 20 years ago. So they didn't have nearly as many drug options as they do now for MS. At the time, there was maybe 3 or 4 in the market, and they had very low efficacy, even if you believe all of the study data that was given on it. But they were maybe 30% effective in 30% of people, which is even a weird statistic to give. But they said to me, probably, "In 10 years, you're gonna be in a wheelchair, so keep a job with benefits and hope that you have somebody to take care of you," which that's terrifying when you're at the time in an abusive marriage with a new baby and thinking, "Wow, like, I can't leave this child under the care of this person or be under their care." But I knew right away that, I think I could cure it, and I think that was a saving grace for me is that I never really believed that fatalistic outlook they gave me. And actually, on my 10-year anniversary, I ran my first triathlon, and so I think that was, like, a little bit of, like, a, rebellion against the doctor to be like, "I told you so, I could do it." Because there had been all these studies, like, when I was looking it up in that 18 months waiting to see the first doctor, there are all of these as much as Google can be scary with all the negative, it's also full of inspiration too. So I started saying instead of looking at all the scariest cases, I'm going to research all the people that healed themselves and start looking what did they all do? What did they have in common that led to healing? And you could shrink lesions, and it's possible to not relapse again. And in my mind, that's a cure. I know that and I know I can't say cure because you can get in trouble for claiming to cure people, but, and the doctor definitely didn't agree. He said that there's no way that you can cure this. It's inevitable. It's progressive. It gets worse. But that first drug in the beginning, I did decide to take one of the most mild forms that they had. It was an injection that was very painful. And I did do that for about 3 years until I decided to get pregnant, another time, and I thought, even though they're saying it's safe, I don't wanna take the risk of, all the times in the past where they said it was safe, and then you had all these birth defects, and they go, "Sorry, we made a mistake." And then I stopped taking drugs for a long period of time, and I was fine because I had left my marriage, I was happy, things were going good in life, and that mirrored perfectly with my health being okay. And it wasn't until I had another, high stress period in my life where the MS kinda came back. And then when it got really bad, I did get scared again because if it was just up to me, I think I would have continued to not take treatment. But when your family is standing around you now and they're so scared and everybody is trying to support you, even if it's not the way you want to have support, but they're all kind of, in their way pressuring a little bit to follow conventional methods. But the
Mhm.
medication instantly, I took it a few times and I started seizing from it, losing my hair. And I just didn't understand how that, it felt like poisoning was actually going to cure me in the long run.
Well, you're making some good points there. And it is poisoning, and that's the definition of allopathic is okay, if you've got XYZ symptom, then we're going to create a condition that has symptoms opposite of that. So you're just creating a new condition. And so it's just a different illness with different symptoms, essentially, is what you're doing by putting some of these substances in the body. And so, yeah, I love that you sought out, okay, here are some successes, and I want to model and mirror, what these success stories did and how they attacked this issue. So, when did things actually start to turn around for you? When did you start to see some progress and start to see some changes? What things were you doing? And what were you learning at that time about mind body connection?
So, I think that it came in, peaks and valleys and plateaus. So, I started, even though I knew right away, okay, I'm not going to do allopathic, and I tried to avoid that, I still started very much in the biochemistry and mechanical model of health. So everything that I was doing was still diet, exercise, physio. And even then, when I practiced yoga, yoga was more just about the asanas and poses. I hadn't practiced it as a, meditative or spiritual path. It was just, I'm going to be flexible and I'm going to even meditation in the beginning was still something I felt like, was a to-do list. I'm like, I'm checking it off because I feel like, people that are enlightened meditate. But I didn't really fully understand it. I was still doing it very mechanically. And so I did make a lot of progress with cleaning up my diet and taking supplements and exercising and even the small amounts of meditation and yoga I was doing. I made a lot of gains, but at some point I kind of plateaued and things stayed where they were. And I started thinking, well, I need to do something else to add to this to get to the next level of healing. And one of the first, aha moments for me is I went to do a colonic treatment at a place near me, and they had a sign for PEMF, which is pulse magnetic field therapy. And I never knew what that was, but the lady that was working there said, "Oh, my boss is on the machine. If you want to come look at it, I'm sure she won't mind." And in this kind of synchronous moment, she had the same disease my dad has, ankylosing spondylitis, which is rare. I'd never met anybody else that had it. And they're approximately the same age, but this lady looks like a ballerina and a yoga teacher. She has like beautiful posture. She's radiating. And
Mhm.
in comparison to my dad, who took all of the immune suppressing drugs and steroid, he now had all companion diseases and was declining. And so I knew right away, I'm like, I want to do whatever she's doing. And so I invested right away into an expensive clinical device, which in the beginning I was only going to use to treat myself because I wanted to lay on it every day. And I didn't want to have to drive and pay someone else. And it eventually, that was my first modality I offered to other people. And that was like getting the lights turned back on. Like instantly laying on the machine for the first time, I looked outside and I noticed the clouds again and I noticed the birds chirping. And I had never been a depressed person in my life, but during that major relapse where I was so impaired, like you mentioned, I couldn't drive myself, feed myself, bathe myself.
Mm.
I guess I had kind of slipped into some kind of a depression. And that moment where all of a sudden I had enough energy in my body where it wasn't just trying to maintain homeostasis, that it actually allowed me the extra energy to worry about something as small as happiness. And then when I noticed that, I was like, well, isn't this beautiful? And I started to realize, okay, I'm going to double down on meditation and breath work and internal energy practices that create internal energy in the body. And I started doing more of that. But again, I got another plateau and I was like, I have energy in the body, but I'm not sustaining my own energy. After I get off the machine, an hour later, I'm depleted again. And I have to go back and put artificial energy back in the body. And that's when I started to realize, well, yes, the energy is what's responsible for the biochemistry of the body. You need energy to do that. But if you have energy leaks in the body, then you're never going to sustain the energy. And so all those biochemistry processes, they fail to work too. So that's when I started realizing what are the energy leaks in my life. And this is where the mind body connection starts to come in because you get leaks because you have emotional and thought loops that are playing, that you're ruminating, that you're have all these limiting beliefs and these nervous system that's like hyper vigilant from all the trauma I'd experienced. I'm always just on overdrive, looking and scanning the environment, waiting for something else to happen that would reaffirm my belief that the world isn't safe, that I'm alone, that I have to do everything myself, I'm not worthy of love. And, whatever the viewers that are listening right now, whatever that energetic pattern is for them, that is just constantly the autopilot of your life playing in the background. And it is draining you because it takes a lot of energy to mentally think. And as we're thinking and we're overthinking instead of just being present in now, which right now for most of us is safe. Even when I was at my sickest, when I was just sitting on the couch, I was safe. I was okay, but I was still living in the well, what if I don't get better? Well, what and I now I didn't do this for my kids and I didn't do that. And you're, judging yourself and you're putting pressure on yourself. That is a huge, a massive energy expenditure to always be living there. And then it creates stress hormones downstream. So as you're thinking those thoughts, it's creating feelings in the body. The feeling is another energy leak. And then it makes biochemistry in the body, which is going to bathe you in all the chemicals that are going to take away from the rest and digest where you would rebuild an immune system. Well, you would repair, or maybe you would even fight the viruses or the mold or fungus, whatever toxicities in the body that also needs to clear out. Your body doesn't have the energy for that. If you're
Hmm.
always expending it in the mental landscape and you're being controlled by external circumstances instead of creating an internal environment which is conducive for healing.
Yeah, I love the way that you described it. And, you have a certain mindset, oh, the world is bad and everybody's out to get me. And that's what you're walking around with. And everything that you focus on all your focus is there to prove yourself right. And somebody that has a different mindset, like, man, things are great. And, I love this. I love nature. I love things around me. And I'm going to have a great day today. Then guess what? When you have that focus, then you're going to look for the things you've got a filter. It's like having a filter in front of you and what you're going to let through. And, that plays out in so many different forms and fashions. But I totally agree that when you have those mindsets, it just activates it heightens your stress response and the stress hormones and everything that goes along with it, and it's an energy leak. It truly is an energy leak. And so that was an amazing thing that you came to that realization that, okay, what's going on in my mind and how I'm processing things are affecting my ability to heal and limiting my ability to heal. And I think that's a missed component for so many people out there is, what's going on in here. And there's some really cool, you can look up spontaneous remission cases, and I'm sure you probably know more about them than I do because you probably investigated some of the MS spontaneous remission cases out there. But one of the things that so many of these people had in common was a belief that they were going to get better or they could get better. And there was other commonalities as well, but they had in their mind like, okay, I can get better and I'm going to get better from this. And so that they were looking for things that would help them to do that, and they filtered out the other things. So that's such an interesting thing to think about and consider, just the importance of what's going on in your thought life. So besides the PEMF, and I love PEMF as well. PEMF is pulse electromagnetic field, as you said. And one of the cool things that it does is that little electromagnetic field, it adds electric charge to your blood cells. They spread out. So it improves circulation and improves oxygen delivery all over your body. And so almost anything could benefit from having better blood flow and better oxygenation of tissue. And so that's a powerful modality. Were there other modalities that you tried or other things that you recognized were helpful as you were trying to seek to correct energy leaks and to fill your body up with some good stuff?
Yeah, so when I really dove into what I call information medicine, so this is now we're going to go above the biochemistry and even above the energy, and we're going to say who is the architect or the blueprint of the energy? What is giving the instructions for the energy to do its job? And then when I
Okay.
got to that level, I started looking at structured water, light, sound, because a phonon, which is the smallest package of sound information, and a photon, which is the smallest package of light information, is all ways to communicate in the body. Besides just like the magnetic or the electrical field, there are these other versions of information that's coming in. So I really experimented a lot with sound healing and also as bioresonance. So this is a technology where it's studying the frequency of different cells, organelles, organs, emotions, meridians, different things in the body and what frequency they normally should look like, scanning the body to see what our biofield or our frequency is emitting. And then I generated a report that was showing which ones might be out of balance and what is a priority. And this was something that I had been trying to privately do on my own, which was I was distilling and filtering water, adding minerals to it, so colloidal minerals, and and then playing frequency to it so that it was had information in the water. And when I finally found a company that was doing bioresonance, but then they were also structuring their water, but they were doing it obviously way more sophisticated than me on my kitchen counter was doing it at home. I was only using tuning forks. Well, they had these like 10,000-volt machines and all of this really cool. And they also had access to labs and testing and doctors. They were researching it properly. And once I found that technology, and started then to offer that not only for my own healing but for other people. I started to see a lot of more transformation because it's so specific now. So in sound bath, when I'm using sound and I'm doing it to a whole room of people, I can play frequencies that we know are therapeutic, 528 hertz, 432. There's binaural beats where the difference between two frequencies is helping to entrain brain waves. But once you have this technology, it's so specific because, as scary as AI is in a lot of ways, it also offers us this way to look at so much data at one time and make sense of it, and then offer really specific targeted approaches. So the infoceuticals, they're kind of almost like homeopathy, but work a little different because homeopathy is made to kind of like trigger a response in the body. You're giving
Right.
something to like make the body respond in a certain way. And infoceutical is information where it's asking the body to go back to its original blueprint. So it's kind of like reminding the body that this is where we were before we were sick. And you do that by playing either frequencies into the body with a device or by drinking the liquid remedies. And it's just kind of telling the body this is the frequency that we should be kind of vibrating at.
This is all very interesting stuff, and it's stuff that I've seen a little bit and I know just a little bit about, but I want to go back to one of the things that you talked about because I don't want to gloss over this, structured water. So, first of all, what the heck is structured water? Is that like where you freeze ice cubes and then you stack them up into like a nice structure, you make a little structure, or what is structured water? And how does structured water impact the body differently than unstructured water?
Okay, I'm going to try to make it as not as scientific as possible so people can follow along. But structured water is, they call it sometimes easy zone, like easy water, or uh, exclusion zone water or the fourth phase of water. So what this is as we put water into the body, and this is how, like, if say you cut yourself, you're not just leaking water out. So the water becomes like crystalline. It forms into little structures and it kind of stacks on and it makes the interstitial fluid of the body. But we can drink a lot of water and still be dehydrated cellularly because the water coming into the body, if we're not integrating it into the cells, then it's not really doing the job it's supposed to do. So in order to do this, to make the fourth phase of water, we're hoping that the cells, and we talked about it just a little bit in the PEMF, where you're trying to make the cells have a magnetic charge where they're not rouleau or they're not stuck together. They're kind of separating so they can go through the arteries and veins easier. So what we're doing now with the structured water is we're taking the cell and we're trying to get, it's called a hydrophilic surface, which is a water loving surface. So we want to have like the right fat membrane on the cell and have it be plump and a thick membrane and healthy and very round. But we want a magnetic charge now as well because that's what's going to create the structure. So when we have the right minerals in the body, which the ion pumps of the cell, we need the right ones to bring things into the cell and then take the byproducts out of the cell, which is how we're detoxing and the cells are functioning correct. So the structured water is when you have this amount of minerals and you have the right frequencies being played. So sunlight is the best way to structure water. So when we get sunlight or any kind of infrared light from the surroundings, it goes in and it makes the charge where we get a negative charge near the cell and positive outside of the cell. And that little bit of a separation of charge creates a battery because that's what a battery is. It is a saline charge between negative and positive. And when we do that within each cell, it creates a structure that holds the water together and it's like a ladder for communication. So this communication is now going to work faster than, say, even a nerve impulse, because a nerve has to go from the synapse to nerve to the and keep going one by one by one until it reaches somewhere. But when we do something with fascia, say, or for with this structured water, it's like when you pull on a sheet. When you pull on one side, the whole sheet moves. And so it doesn't require like going in a chain. It's just like an instantaneous and kind of a signal that happens, and it's all done through light, through this structured water in our body. So it's way more actually scientific than that, but I'm trying to say it in a way that might be easy for people to understand.
Yeah, this is making some sense, and I've heard people talk about that trees, how can a giant tree that's 150 feet high, how can it get water from the ground up to nourish the leaves and branches like 150 feet up in the air? The trees don't have a pump. They're not able to create a vacuum to do that. What actually happens is they structure the water, and the water molecules essentially just stack up. And like you said, it's almost like it just pulls it right up there. And it's an amazing thing. Let's go back to, we're talking about the frequencies that are affecting the body, the light and sound frequencies and having an impact on the body. And this may sound crazy to some people that maybe you're not aware of this, but this is this is a very true thing. There's a lot of research behind it. In fact, frequencies have been weaponized, and so there are, you know, countries that can use frequencies to incapacitate enemies and cause stomach pain and diarrhea and vomiting and stuff, so they can do stuff while all the other soldiers are sick. It can be weaponized, but can also be used for good for good things too. And so let's talk a little bit about the sound frequencies and the light frequencies and how those are hitting the cells and impacting the cells, and how like does you talked about a sound bath. Does the power matter? Does the volume level matter? Like, what are the factors that really make a difference when it comes to frequencies?
So when we talk about the PEMF mats, they actually the intensity matters on that because you want to have 15 Gauss rating at whatever cells you're trying to treat. And there's a really big drop off between where the field starts and when it moves into out into space. So you want to have a high enough if you're trying to treat, like, say, for myself with MS and you're trying to treat through an 8-inch skull, you have to have such a huge magnetic field that as it drops off, as you move through the brain, you still have such a high intensity that you're going to have a magnetic charge that is a therapeutic effect. But sound and light is much different, and same with the infoceutical. This is just about the signature that you're giving. It doesn't matter about the intensity. It's what information is on it. So, like, say with the sound wave, it's a sound has to be carried on another medium. So whether it's air or water. So it's like almost like information is riding on a secondary wave. So one of the most beautiful things, because sound bath, I love it, and I love when people come, especially in person, to be bathed. Especially a lot of my tools oscillate, and so they're on top of people and they move, so that way you're actually like in the field. But one of the most beautiful things that you can do for sound healing is, first of all, your own voice. So whether you do that as mantra or whether you do it as chanting, humming for your vagus nerve stimulation, or just being careful of the words you speak and the words that you think internally, because they are also creating a type of neuroacoustic sound. But something I think that most of us don't think about, and I'm going to go back to when I was talking about how in bioenergetics we look at germination of the fetus. That when the baby is in there, you can already have a circulation system and you see the blood is moving before there's ever a heart. So it begs the question then, how is the blood moving? And what is the heart really for then if it's not just pumping blood? And structured water, again, is how we make that blood move. Because when we have structured water on all the blood and that interstitial fluid, the magnetic charge moves the blood. So the blood technically can move in the body without the heart pumping it. So what is the heart really doing then? So in bioenergetics, we like to think that the heart, every time it pumps, it's imprinting a frequency. So a phonon, the sound, it's imprinting a sound on whatever liquid is in the chamber at the time. So that sound then is being then carried through the rest of the body, and it's going into our organs and our muscles and our tissues. And in Chinese medicine, we have yin and yang organs that pair. So the yin is always a solid muscle, like a thicker organ, and the yang is hollow. It has empty spaces or tubules in it. And when we think about a musical instrument, so a piano, a guitar, a drum, it has hollow spaces in it as well. So that when you strike the instrument, that the phonons that it creates are contained and held and reverberate and resonate in the hollow spaces. So when your heart is pumping, it's imprinting this frequency that's being carried as messengers throughout your body and then stored in all of those empty spaces. And it amplifies there. So it's sending a message to the body on what kind of information for whether healing or disharmony. What depends what you're thinking about. And this is when we talk about the heart and head coherence. Is because if you can get your mind to be coherent with your heart, which means we're making decisions not out of ego, not out of fear, not out of this limiting beliefs, but intentional thoughts of our primary frequencies, which is love and compassion, forgiveness, and not just for others, for ourselves. But when we live in that kind of internal thinking, that's what our heart beats. And so that moves through the body, and that now becomes the sound or the messenger that the rest of our body is listening to. So outside of even the frequency devices, because not all of your audience is going to have access to practitioners that have the devices I have, or even maybe a sound bath, but they can become their own sound healers. And that is just using your own voice intentionally and your own thoughts because they are what's going to create the messages of your body.
That's an interesting thing. And seeing some of the research on that heart brain coherence, it's pretty wild to think about. And it's pretty interesting that those magnetic fields between your heart and your brain, they're communicating outside of your nervous system. They're communicating outside of what we knew of the body before. It's pretty amazing to get to even just a little bit of an understanding. Going back a little bit in your story, you lost vision in one eye. How is that now? How is your vision? What are your symptoms like now? And how did things, come back for you in terms of your multiple sclerosis?
So at the first, like maybe 15 years I had the MS, I honestly didn't really respect it that much because my symptoms, if I did get one, they would come one at a time and they mostly resolved. Like usually 90 to 95% they would resolve in a couple weeks or a couple months. So my one eye did it from those first attacks. So it did have residual loss. Like I think it still would be considered legally blind that eye. And that's also because the optic nerve is there's only one of them. There's not real estate like there is in the rest of the body. So the rest of your body, even if you have some damage to it, generally when you do any kind of like neuro training or remapping of the nervous system, you can kind of bypass the damage and make new neural connections through neuroplasticity. Optic nerves are a little bit trickier, but what all that first 15 years, um, mostly the MS recovered, and I was doing fine still. I was working, I was running, I was taking care of my family. 5 years ago, though, I had this major relapse, the one that left me bedbound and blind, and really needing full-time care, and that process has been, in the works for the last 5 years. So I've definitely gotten better to the point where I'm working, and I can drive again, I can, cook, I can do all kinds of things. Could I run a marathon? No. But would I want to? Probably not, because there's a part of me that also thinks that part of the journey of MS in the beginning, I had this mind that I had to overcome it all the time, and so I pushed through a lot, and I kept trying harder, pushing harder. And I think actually I've learned in the last few years with the MS that there's a bit of surrender that's required and acceptance where you don't have to fight against it all the time. And just kind of the wisdom of living with what is. And so wherever I am at right now, that I'm just going to be okay with that and I'm going to be happy with that. If it gets better, great. If it doesn't, that's okay too. And I think that having that kind of mindset is actually gonna allow the last little bit of healing, to come because the pressure is taken off. where before I was resisting it because I was fighting my diagnosis all the time and pushing against it. And now it's not that I'm saying, oh, just surrender and don't do anything about it. Don't try. Don't. I still follow the diet. I still do all the things to get better, but I'm just not so attached anymore to the outcome. Where that if I have a little bit of a slide or one day I feel worse than the day before, that would have thrown me off before and I would have felt like, "Oh, this isn't working. Maybe this wasn't right." I would have put pressure. Now I'm just kind of, just a little bit more okay with just how things are, and I would say I'm about 90% recovered from where I was. So nerve damage can be tricky like heart damage. The cells are generally a little slower to recover, and I had a lot of battle, and to overcome because my decline was so far that there was a lot to get back up. But, I still think for the age that I'm at right now, I'm probably still healthier than a lot of people in my age bracket because generally as a society, whether your symptoms are as obvious as MS, um, I think there's, pretty much a general unwellness in our population, especially in North America. Whether it's diabetes, being overweight, addictions, we just distractions in general, and just, like, anxiety. There's so many things, right, that are just on the rise.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, the the medicine that you're using, you called it, what'd you call it? Infoceuticals? Is that what you called it?
Yes, yeah.
An infoceutical? How often does someone need to get a treatment, and how long would it take to notice some changes or to notice some improvements? And also, like, what are some of the things that it's most helpful for treating or for helping people with?
So that's a big question to answer because it's all so different for people and it depends where you're at energetically. So when we have things and this is in no way to downplay or diminish people with mental illness because I understand that that's a very complex, hard thing to treat. But when we are dealing though with mindset and emotions, once we make a decision to flip the switch to think differently, to act differently, as long as we're consistent and we stay with it, we can make that energetic change very rapidly. But when we start to have things that have moved from energetics into the biochemistry of the body, so if we've already had the heart attack, if we've already got cancer, if something's already gone awry, say the MS for me, you're now also on the timeline of the physics and the chemistry constraints. So now we have to work at a different level. And it still is starting with energy and mindset because we need our mind right in order to create the environment for healing. But we are now going to respect how long it takes the body to heal itself when we put new messages into it. So in pharmaceuticals, normally the protocol would be you scan once a month. You get the scan, it makes a report and it tells you the priorities you have. And I don't like to give more than 5 remedies at a time because I don't think we should confuse the body with too many new messages. We want it, they're subtle, right? Like, and this message is going to be much quieter than Wi-Fi, than 5G, than if you're going to still look at news stories for 5 hours before you go to bed and blue light. I mean, that message is gonna be very loud compared to the subtle things that energy medicine is doing. So we're gonna give 5 remedies at a time, and you take them for 28 days, and then generally we rescan and we see what's moved, what doesn't, because sometimes the body is going to heal just like PEMF. When you give it new energy, I'm not telling it what to heal. I'm just giving it the information and the energy, and the body's gonna decide what it thinks is priority and what it works on first. So these things can be layered because we don't all have the same root cause. We don't all have the same weak link in our chain, and we all don't have the same toxicity, trauma, mindset. Like we're all so individual that I think the thing that's been the most helpful, and I think that heals people the quickest, is definitely things like sleep and anxiety. And the ability to just calm down in general. So, just to kind of get that overall feeling of like just being chilled out a little bit more, which is really honestly a beautiful first step for a lot of people because, whether it's only a mental issue you're having or whether it's physical, the physical things can cause the mental stress to come with it because you're so aware of your pain all the time or all the discomfort. So to get the
Mhm.
mind to just kind of calm down, and that can be immediate. Like I've had people take the infoceuticals within hours, they're saying, I feel better. And then for somebody like myself, I've been taking infoceuticals now for 3 years probably. I don't take them every month. I'll do kinda 6 months on, and then I take a few months off, and I'll do another 6 months. And every time I get a little bit different effect and a little bit different in the unlayering of all the problems I have. But I mean, I'm also coming from a place where I had a lot of health challenges. It's not even just MS. I also had Graves' disease and hypoglycemic and migraines, hormonal issues, lots of stuff.
Yeah, it's and I totally agree with what you're talking about. It's different for every person and every condition is different. Even if two people have the exact same symptoms, the exact same diagnosis, their path to recovery might be just completely different. And I don't feel like there's any just one size fits all approach. So, if you would, what are some things like high impact areas for moms, for women, I think, especially to focus on to protect themselves, to protect their energy? What are some areas like maybe in our environment, or what are some things that go on around us that maybe we could be mindful of or be more mindful of and try to protect our energy and protect ourselves from?
So I think 3 come to mind specifically for moms because this was my case too. I was homeschooling, I was sick, and I had been a single mom for a lot of years too, so I was also being the breadwinner with all of the health challenges going on. I think that one of the simplest, easiest ones to do, is to do gratitude. Now, I know a lot of your listeners are gonna be probably already do grace at their table, and I think that this is a beautiful time to add gratitude into, because I used to find that when we would all get together in my family, this was the first time we had hung out in the day, and there would be a lot of, like, people complaining about their day, or even the first time to nag each other, like, "Why did you do that?" or "You didn't put that away," or, and I started thinking, "Wow, this is we're not even just not digesting our food correctly, we're not digesting our emotions and our realities, and this is the first time we're all gonna sit down together." So I started that every night we do, around the table and 5 things you're grateful for. And I think that right there, it just shifts dinner right away, where everybody's talking now about the good things that happen in the day as opposed to recounting, all the things that didn't work out. And that little reframe right there is infectious because I find now in the beginning they all complained nobody wanted to do it. But now we all interrupt each other, not out of rudeness, but because one person's remembrance of something triggers somebody else. And they're like, oh, wait, wait, I have another one. You know what else happened great today? And, just so we were talking about whatever filter you have and whatever you're looking for, you'll find more of. So when we're going to sit down to have a meal together, I like to not only are we blessing our food, but we're blessing our lives and we're, connecting with each other. But once you go in that rest, like parasympathetic state and rest and digest, you assimilate the food better too. And so, if you are following a diet now, or you are taking supplements, or you're doing anything, like this is also amplifying the physical processes in the body because your nervous system is calmed down enough to do those things. And another one I really like because this one, unless you have really young kids and they jump in bed with you, it depends what age. Mine are a little older now, so my teenagers, I have to wake them up. But I still think a beautiful time to do this is either when you're first going to bed at night or waking up in the morning, because you're very in theta waves still. So you're very self hypnosis at that time, to do a little mind movie. And to start the day and to end the day with really putting yourself in a place of where do you want to be, and to take an honest stock of your life too, and not to be mad at yourself, but to look around and think, whatever's going on in my life is a product of whatever I've been thinking and feeling. And so if I don't like the way things look, whether that's with my family, my job, my health, then I'm gonna think different thoughts and feel different things. And taking those little moments before you even got out of bed, you don't even have to open your eyes yet to really just feel into whatever that vision of yourself is that you want to see in the world, and to really make it like come to life, like put a soundtrack with it, put emotions with it, see yourself in it. How are people seeing you? Like really live that experience. And these things now take no extra time in your day. You haven't had to do another thing. You're not putting another thing on your list. You're just doing these very simple, quiet things. And, I wasn't going to say this one, but I'm going to say the last one is to just hum. So anybody that's having any health issues, humming is a really good way to stimulate your vagus nerve. And
Mhm.
again, to just entrain all that enteric nervous system and everything lower, heart rate, blood pressure, digestion. And what a beautiful way to hum. Hum if you have kids, hum to them. I like to do it to my dog. My dog follows me all day. And so I sing to her and I hum to her all day. And she doesn't care if I have a nice singing voice, right? So I'm not trying to impress anybody. I just hum to her. And that these again, there's such small ways to just shift energetically. And not you don't have to pay any money. You don't have to go see a practitioner. You don't have to add anything into your day.
I love those things. And the mind movie, I love calling it a mind movie. Just thinking about, what you want things to be like, how you want to be and how you want to show up in the world. That's a beautiful thought. And I mean, being faithful to do those little things consistently, what do you think that would do for chronic illness? What do you think that would do for, stress levels? What do you think that would do in the world if a bunch of people just started doing those few things?
I think it's transformative. It's when I had somebody ask me in the beginning, she was a very elderly, sick lady, and she couldn't even make it in my house for treatment. So I had to buy a carrying case for my equipment so I could go see her. And she asked me, what started my healing journey? And I had to kind of stop and think because I was like, I don't know, I've done so many things, but it was gratitude. Gratitude started the whole journey because if you can't even see the possibilities and you can't even see yourself getting well, you will not start to take the actions in your life that are required for that agency and that sovereignty and responsibility of your own health. It has to start with the vibration first. So you already have to start putting yourself into a place where you deserve the healing, you believe in your healing, and once you believe it and you see it, that it's possible, you will take all the other steps because you will become aligned to that frequency and to that reality. And the more you align to it and consistently, because consistency is key. You don't go to the gym and get a beach body in one day. You got to go over and over every day.
What?
Yeah, unfortunately. And so the same thing is gonna be for showing up for yourself in this way. I mean, most of us that got illnesses, it took a long time to get there. We did, little, death by a thousand cuts. So it was one injury and insult after another. Healing is the same way. We have to keep showing up every day. We have to keep that high vibe mindset of that it is possible, I deserve it, and I can do it. And it will. Like it almost becomes like inevitable that you will heal if you're bathing yourself all the time in that state and that feeling of that I already am healed.
Yeah, that's not an easy thing to do whenever you're in the middle of it, but it can be such a powerful thing. Dayna, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and thank you so much for sharing some of your health journey with us and sharing some of your successes with us. If people wanted to learn more about you and learn more about the things that you do, where could they find you or where could they connect with you?
So my website and business, energyovermatter.com. And there I have free healing circles every second Wednesday. So if anybody wants to jump in and just kind of check out what energy medicine is, learn a little bit of the philosophy around this new paradigm shift, that's a great entry point in. And then you can also book my services through there as well. And I have a podcast, Mind Over MS. And I have a book that came out in December, so this one is Unlearn Dis-ease, Relearn Well-being, and that's available Amazon.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Discover Health podcast. Remember, your health is a journey, not a destination. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next week.